why don't we start with you holding this and read what's on the back.
We charge you, spirits, to enter peacefully, to answer truthfully, and to freely depart. That's really pretty, actually.
Oh, that's handmade. I did all the wood burning on that, and it is a Ouija board, talking board, spirit board, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, this is not the one from your friend.
Oh no, this is ours. This is the one that we've been using since 1999, 2000. I mean, we don't use it frequently. We don't use it a lot, but I would be remiss if I didn't try many different types of tools for communication. Actually, there's a story behind why I. Well, actually, why don't we talk about, because that is a Ouija board. Woo! and Ouija boards are terrifying. Why don't you tell me all the things that you've heard about Ouija boards?
Oh, well, they open doors to the other side that you don't want to be opened. They automatically summon demons that want to confuse you.
So, door.
Door,
Mm.
right.
Okay.
By
Demons.
using them, you automatically summon demons. They're evil, obviously. Demons evil.
Mine has a reset button. I don't know how evil that can be.
uh,
I'll explain that in a minute.
Mostly the demons evil that it could lead to suicide or death, ultimately.
And if I told you probably before the Exorcist film, these were still just a party game for most people.
Really?
Well, now I have to say first, Robert Murch talking boards is the, as far as I know, like the worldwide expert on this whole thing, and his collection is amazing. Mm-hmm. So before I go muscling in on anybody's territory, he's the person, if you have any questions about anything with talking boards, their history, this is pretty much his thing. But I own a Ouija board. I have used a Ouija board. I used them when I was a kid and a teenager, sometimes with hilarious results and sometimes with slightly terrifying results. And I am not in the camp of Ouija board haters. I don't think that it's automatically going to open a door. I don't think it's automatically going to summon a demon. I don't think that it's automatically a bad thing. But it can be dangerous. Like any tool, it has a lot to do with how you're approaching it, the energy you put into it.
Right.
Now, there was the episode of Paranormal State where some people had been doing work with a Ouija board, and I showed them how to close it when they were done.
Mm-hmm. I remember
now, that's not strictly something that was part of like what you do with Ouija boards from when they started out, but it's, I think, important because right now, with all of the media portrayals of Ouija boards, and sort of like the superstitions and the tales about them and the way they've been built up, it's too many people come to the boards with fear. And anything in the paranormal, if you approach it with fear, you're going to attract things that are interested in that fear. Mm-hmm. So when you use it, and some part of your brain is like, oh my goodness, I might summon Satan. But seriously, when that's what you're bringing to it, even if it's just a little thing in the back of your head, that's still putting energy into it. Mm-hmm. And it might suddenly like take a dark turn, not because the board itself is a bad thing, but because you're focusing on that negativity. Actually, and I recently was with Robert Murch at Ohio Wizard World Comic Con, mm-hmm. and he had the best way of describing this. You know, when you have a telephone conversation with a friend and it just goes horribly, horribly wrong, and they start saying things that you don't want to hear, and they're yelling at you and everything. Do you, though, I mean, if you're me, you may throw the phone across the room. But do you subsequently burn the phone, bury the phone, dunk it in a lake, or something like that, and blame the phone for the message that came through it?
That's a really good point.
Oh, it's an amazing point.
No, you don't.
And that's really what he's saying is, this is your telephone, essentially. And you don't necessarily blame the tool for the message that comes through. Mm-hmm. The message has everything to do with what's putting that message into this, and since we're talking about something that's going to be working off of the energy of the people using it, the people using it bring something to that message as well. Any communication is a two-way street.
Do you think that it opens doors to the other side?
I think that it can be used in that capacity if that is how people are approaching the tool.
Okay.
Which is why we put the little prayer on the back, the little intention to put out to the world as well as to ourselves that when we sit down to use this, I and my group, anybody who will be sitting in on the use of the board, we read this off together to help focus our intention of only drawing in things that will enter peacefully, answer truthfully, and freely depart, and not linger around and just seek to be a bother.
Right.
And I actually ended up making this because there was a time when, although I could hear stuff, I've perceived spirits most of my life, and I come from a family where that wasn't the weirdest thing in the world, certainly. My mom had stories about perceptions of ghosts, my grandmother, a couple of my aunts, and it's going to sound weird where I am at right now with my career, but there was a time where it was very hard for me to want to share out loud the stuff that I could perceive. And when spirits were speaking directly to me, asking me to pass a message along, I didn't want to sound crazy pants. Mm-hmm. Like I really wasn't sure I entirely trusted it for this reason. As you know, I'm also a writer. Mm-hmm. In addition to a nonfiction writer, I'm a fiction writer. As a fiction writer yourself, you know characters have voices.
Yes.
When you're telling stories, they have very distinct voices, and you when you're writing, you hear those voices all rolling around in your head. Mm-hmm. Now, as a writer, you're aware that they are parts of you, that they are creations and characters, but sometimes the writing and the creativity gets so intense, they do seem to take on a life of their own. Mm-hmm. My concern back in 99, 2000 was, how do I know for sure that this is actually a spirit conveying a message that I can hear here, and not my wishful thinking, my imagination, creating a character that has a voice that seems like it's not my voice, mm-hmm. but is actually just coming from me.
That makes sense to me.
And so here was my experiment. we had a couple of spirits show up, and one of them had a very important to him message, and he wanted to have a conversation and convey that message to a friend who lived up in Michigan at the time. And he was telling me most of this, but some of it was, like, there was so much of it, it was hard to kind of filter some of it out anyway. And I thought if I was able to find a way to create a medium, some third-party way that this message could be conveyed, if it was the same stuff that I was hearing in my head, if I didn't tell them what I was hearing, and by some other method we came up with basically the same message, that would help me understand that what I was hearing was legitimate. Skeptic approaches to the Ouija board don't have any fear about this being, some grand doorway to the other world, or that people are going to summon demons. The biggest concern when you're using a Ouija board is the question of whether or not it is Ideomotor Response. Mm-hmm. Basically what that is, it's a big word for somebody is pushing it. Mm-hmm. Or, now, sometimes we all have that asshole friend who, when you sit down, you know that person's pushing it. Like, it's really obvious that somebody's just, effing around. Ideomotor response is more an unconscious muscular reaction. You expect it to move, and you start pushing it even though you don't realize you're doing it, you're not doing it consciously, and so that the messages that come through, when they do come through, are coming from your subconscious. So essentially, you're talking to yourself.
Right.
And that is how your standard skeptic tends to, if they credit this at all, it's through that kind of unconscious stuff.
Well, then this should be used in psychology.
Automatic writing, things like that. This has too much baggage, too many associations with all kinds of occult stuff that you'd never see it used like that. But
it's interesting, the idea of talking to yourself.
Yeah. Well, anything that you use to extend yourself outside of yourself, like having a conversation with yourself in a mirror, automatic writing, anything that allows you to let your subconscious kind of come through, has its use. Mm-hmm. But I saw that as a potential problem that I had to also rule out. So I needed to rule out voices in my head are legitimately a spirit with a message, and anything that's coming through the board, I have to rule out that it's somebody subconsciously communicating.
Right.
which means that if I'm the one who is the one person who knows the message, I can't touch this when we do the sitting. So I have that very low table, the little Asian-style table that you saw. We had 3 people sit on the board, and instead of the little planchette, we actually used a brandy snifter, a glass, and they each put 2 fingers from both hands on the glass. The 3 people sitting did not ask the questions. There was a person who was not on the board who would ask the questions, and sometimes I would ask the questions, but I absolutely, as the person who had the expectation for what the answers were, I wasn't the one on the board.
Right, that makes sense.
To remove any possibility that if I'm asking the questions, it means that I expect, somewhere in my head, I have formulated an answer. There's an answer I expect to that question. Take me off the board entirely so that I'm not unconsciously or consciously pushing it. We had somebody else who would record where things were going and how it was pointing out. And one thing we found out real quick is when it would first start, it would just kind of go back and forth on the board. This has led to a phenomenon that some people identify as a demon, but really, ZoZo. Most of the boards, this bottom line starts with O and ends with Z. And it just will go back and forth between ZoZo, and people are like, oh my God, ZoZo is a demon. No, it's really, it might as well be like Anna. I mean, it just swings back and forth. It's just random motion as it's kind of.
That would be an awful awkward name. That's not a demon name.
No,
is
it's well, it probably is in some people's books now because of television shows, but it's not.
Okay.
Just, I wrote the Dictionary of Demons.
Well, I know.
I have dug through demon names. It is not a demon name. It might be associated with a band from the 70s and so, but no, it's not. Anyhow, ZoZo aside, it would swing a little bit and kind of like get used to itself, like. And one thing we found that was helpful is to kind of like to crack the energy of the board. Like we'd start and the people would just kind of move it around themselves. Very conscious about moving it just to get a sense of how it slid across on the thing.
It's interesting because in yoga you start to warm up your body before you could do
anything.
anything.
So we'd warm it up a little bit and they would move it around and then they would hit here in the middle, we put reset just to give it a starting point. And whenever it started to just be all gibberish, we'd be like, okay, go back to clear, go back to reset, and start over. Because sometimes it would move so fast that we couldn't tell where all it was going. And sadly, the one thing is when we stain the board, this part, it's separate pieces of wood, and this one just took the stain, and it's super dark. So it made it hard, especially when it was up in E, F, G, H, I. It was harder to read. So So to go back to the story with me, so I'm in contact with a spirit, or at least what I think is a spirit. It has a message. I'm hesitant to pass the message along to my friend because I'm not totally sure that it's not just something I'm making up. So I look for an outside opinion, and we use this because the other people I had access to did not identify as spirit mediums, weren't people who necessarily could hear spirits. And this was a way that the spirit could potentially communicate through them.
That's actually even more interesting to me.
Well, it gives the option of. Now, I believe that if a spirit is actually using this to communicate, I think that it's taking advantage of the ideomotor response. I think that it's communicating to people, and. Pardon me. Katja, you are just mean. Stop it. Stop it. Shoo.
Adam, you would make sure you document that.
Boat. You don't have to be mean to him. He is a big goofball.
Remy. Poor Remy. Oh. Katja, what a jerk.
She is really, really mean to him. I wish she wasn't.
Adam, are
Remy?
you tickled that you caught that on camera?
I saw the moment coming.
Yeah, Remy, huge strapping Maine Coon, and he just lets Katja beat the hell out of it. I don't even
The
know.
blooper moment.
It wouldn't be a lecture without the cats coming
Yeah,
in.
seriously, like they're all
They
here
know.
going, hey, what's going on, guys? See
Uh-oh,
how
catch
serious
that.
and scary the Ouija board is. All the cats are like, hi, I want to play with this thing. All right, my personal opinion after watching all of these sessions is it would be really exhausting if the spirit themselves is moving the planchette. I mean, think about any investigation you've been on. How often does a physical object move?
Not very often. For me, more than normal investigators, but not very
Well,
often.
How big are those objects?
Not that big.
How often do they move?
Not very often. Maybe once every like 5 times.
I'm gonna toss out the idea that it takes energy, active energy, and an expenditure of that energy on the part of the spirit to physically move something,
That makes sense.
and it's tremendously difficult. It's much easier to just kind of, spectrally project their presence, sensations, temperature drops, battery drains, things that are that don't necessarily have weight to them. But it isn't all that hard to influence a person. That doesn't involve physically moving something and expending the amount of energy that it takes to take something that is non-physical to then affect something that's physical.
Right.
So I don't personally believe that the spirit is physically moving the planchette.
I don't think so either. That would be hard.
What I think is happening is the spirit is communicating to the people who are sitting on the board. They're not aware that they can hear it. They're not aware that they're being communicated with. But on a subconscious level, they're picking up the message. So their ideomotor response, that subconscious moving of the planchette, they become the mediums through which the communication occurs. That's my opinion of it. That's what I have observed. And I found it very interesting when we were doing our experiments with it. There would be a point, and everybody who's done investigations knows this feeling. There's that moment where the air just gets heavy and thick. There's just a sense of potential. Like something's about to happen, and it's a tension that kind of is strung out. And we would feel that presence as the spirits gathered round, and eventually it became several of them would kind of like cluster around. And when it would be like, doing the ZoZo thing all over the place, it was more a matter of one hadn't stepped up to communicate as just him. Like many of them were all basically playing tug of war with the planchette, all trying to get their messages at the same time. So it was kind of, just chaos. But you would feel the presences. It would get really heavy. And when it was one communication, and this was amazing to watch. And I wish that what we were doing wasn't so very private and personal in terms of the message, because I would have loved to have documented this and shared it. Because you would have me asking the question, and it hit this rhythm where the 3 people sitting on the board were saying what the message was as it was being spelled out,
Cool.
in unison, as it started moving. And usually they had their eyes closed. Oftentimes they were just down like this, not paying attention to where it was going.
Creepy, but cool.
It was creepy, but it was cool. But it also told me, okay, there's something going on here.
Right.
And it was not, in my opinion, I didn't have to clean my house out afterwards. I didn't have to chase off demons. One of the spirits was pretty ticked off about something that had happened to him in the past, but that's really not unusual for spirits who died a violent death.
Right.
And this guy was just really all about burying old hatchets, and that's about as much as I can say. The person who would write down where the thing was pointing, and like I said, we used a glass, so it was where the glass, what letter it went over completely. He was the one who would just watch, and usually it was Paul. We've got pages of some of the stuff that he was recording for that.
It's really cool.
But having the person or persons who have a vested interest in the response off the board meant that they weren't the ones unconsciously creating the message. It meant that the message was coming from somewhere else. Now, that doesn't possibly address the small chance that there was telekinetic action on the part of the person asking the questions, but that really takes us down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. I think so too.
And also by really by Occam's razor, is it more likely that there was a spirit communicating, or was it more likely that I was using my super phenomenal brain powers to influence everybody sitting there to push the planchette?
Wait.
Yeah.
Occam's razor is the most likely answer.
The simplest.
Elephant in the room. Right, okay.
Yeah, Occam's razor is the thing that requires the least amount of hoops to jump through. Like, if the simplest answer is probably the one that is the most likely. So, going to the idea that I was somehow mentally controlling 3 people on a board and forcing them all to spell out what I wanted them to spell out seems less likely than they were tapping into something else that was communicating with them. At least it seems less likely to me. I mean, who do you believe? I was mind controlling everybody in the room, or a spirit was invited to communicate? And don't answer that.
Let me think about that for a minute. You know what's really embarrassing is I'm pretty sure we already talked about Occam's razor on camera, and I should have been able to regurgitate it, but no.
Okay. It's okay. But like I said, I'm in the camp. This is a tool, and my stance on tools. It's like a hammer. You can build a house. You can bash in somebody's skull. It's all in how you use it.
Oh man, Michelle.
If you come to it with a lot of fear. If looking at this strikes fear in your heart, don't use it.
Exactly.
Because you're not going to be able to remove yourself from that fear. That's the bottom line. And what you're bringing to it then, and then what you're going to attract to you, is going to just live up to that fear. Whether it is unconscious movement or actually a spirit that's attracted to that fear, either way, you're already tainted out the gate, so you shouldn't mess with it. The only way you should play with something like this, and I really don't think that these are much different from any other method of communicating with people. It's really not. It's just there's so much myth around it now. And again, The Exorcist is really where that is cemented. It's a small scene, but you see the little girl using the Ouija board by herself, and then she becomes possessed. That's how she has invited the demon into her life. And I have had at least 30-minute conversation / polite argument with Lorraine Warren on one of our cases where we found a Ouija board under one of the client's children's bed. And the curious thing with that investigation was Lorraine did a walkthrough. The girl's room she found to be the least haunted, like the least active. And then we found the Ouija board under the girl's bed, and Lorraine wanted to suddenly reinterpret what she had previously said, because for her these are such charged items. This is such a dangerous tool in her eyes that she automatically was like, well, now I have to rethink this whole thing because this might be the cause of it.
It's almost like it's more likely that whoever used that invited somebody more positive in.
Well, what I had asked Lorraine to do, and what we ended up doing, was with tools and symbols and any of it, the real meaning is in what the person using it meant when they were using it. So we took it to the daughter, and we're like, so we found these things. And it turned out that they were things that were left to her by a relative, that she did practice some magic, and what she had been doing in her room was in fact protective magic. She hadn't actually really been using the Ouija board anyway, and partly because with all of the mystique about it, she wasn't so sure that she should. Again, if this makes you terrified, don't use it. But if you can divorce yourself from your expectation of fear or ZoZo demons or Satan or whatever, and just approach it with the same kind of attitude that you would with a K2 meter, an ovilus, whatever other kind of fun things that we use that are just mediums, an intermediary between you and the spirit that allows the spirit to try to communicate with you and answer questions, then give it a shot. The reason that this came about was when the Fox sisters launched the whole spiritualist movement in Hydesville, New York with the rapping ghost. It became a big deal to communicate with spirits with having the spirit rap. And I don't mean the musical style. Although that would be entertaining. Broke Rebecca. So do I say, stop, don't touch this?
Oh my. Oh no, you didn't.
I got it wrong too, which is probably pathetically
I don't
funny.
even know that was like around when I was born, wasn't it?
Oh. Okay, no hammer time for the.
That's right, MC Hammer guy.
Yeah, no hammer time for the.
He's the one with the pants.
Yes, no one will forget those pants. Those things were hideous. Anyhow, okay, so the spirits would rap, and when they wanted to have the spirit communicate, they would call out the letters of the alphabet. And think about how tedious this is.
Oh my goodness, this is already tedious.
Well, no, and this is slow and tedious to begin with. But they would call out the letters of the alphabet and wait for the spirit to rap at the one that was the letter in the word, and they would go through the entire alphabet over and over and over again to spell out a message.
Wow. Wow.
This state, Ohio, is where we have and Robert Murch confirmed, where we have the first recorded instance of people creating boards with the alphabet written down on them. So rather than having the tedium of A, B, C, and that response with the spirits, you had the spirit moving. And a planchette had originally been used for automatic writing, so it had that little pointer that you have on this. Yeah. Originally, without the board, you would put a pencil in it and use it to move to create automatic writing. And so they basically
I don't think I could do that. With automatic writing, that would be hard.
Oh, no, it's weird. I tried it. Like, I've experimented with just about everything people have done, and the planchette for automatic writing, I was just like, I don't even know how people were doing that. But they took the two concepts and they just merged them.
Okay.
Which is, again, it's not like they had, transistor radios and spirit boxes or the kind of technology that we have. This was the technology that they had. So the invitation for communication is no more dangerous with this than it is with anything else. And the real danger comes into what are you trying to invite? Because the real door is you, the communicator. And at the end of the day, if you didn't like the communication, understand that communication is a two-way street. You had a part of it, the thing that you're communicating with has a part in it, and don't burn your iPhone. Okay.
You're bad children.
Damn it, Remy. Shaking that. I got it.
Now. You goofballs.